It's the highest honor that our country gives to a Canadian. So it is really the crowning moment of my life and my career. I never expected as a kid growing up in Elliott Lake that I would ever get an honor like this. So it is, it's touching and it's moving and it's wonderful. And it's brought a lot of joy to the people that I know, people in the North and people in my law firm and people in Freemasonry, because I'm an active Freemason. It's brought a lot of joy to a lot of people.
Do you know who nominated you?
Yes, actually. Several people nominated me, but most recently, I know that my nomination was driven by former councillor Ed Pierce in Elliott Lake. So it's a Made in the North nomination and a Made in the North appointment.
Talk about growing up in Elliott Lake. What was that like?
I loved growing up in Elliott Lake. I loved the nature. I loved the friendly, supportive environment. Lots of loving family and our neighbors on Westview Crescent. The neighbor ladies were like deputy moms, I called them, you know. Mother always said that she had given them full authority to spank me if I misbehaved. It was a wonderful experience being able to just wander across the street and down the hill to the lake and jump in the lake in the summertime and go tobogganing in the wintertime. All of that was great. Although, of course, once I realized I was gay, it became a little more complicated.
And how old were you?
I would say I was probably 12 or 13 when I sort of realized that I was gay and went to the local Elliott Lake Public Library and looked up homosexuality in those big old index card catalogs, you may remember, the big wooden ones, and sort of snuck around looking up the books that I could find, trying to figure out what was going on. And I realized that I probably wasn't going to change, and it was probably going to be not a very easy life.
Did it get easier when you went to school, like left town to go to school, university?
A little. I mean, I actually started the Western Gay Association at Western University because the club had folded before I got there. It was still a very difficult time in the 70s. You know, you have to remember that's when Harvey Milk was assassinated. It was Anita Bryant was leading the forces of repression against us. It was a difficult time, but that's when I really got involved in gay activism when I was at Western University, and that's where I met my partner, who later became my husband, Greg Lawrence, who's really been. He deserves the Order of Canada, or maybe the Star of Patience, or something like that, because he's been a constant support for me for 48 years.
Well, you were involved in that constitutional case for same-sex marriage, weren't you?
I was indeed. I was one of the principal lawyers in that case about 20 years ago, representing the Metropolitan Community Church of Toronto. So that was a really wonderful case to be involved in, and I particularly was pleased as a Christian to be representing Christians who believed that same-sex marriage should be available to Christians who wanted to bless those relationships. And if other Christians didn't want to do it, that was okay. But in a country where we respect religious freedom, people shouldn't be imposing their religious beliefs on others. And the Supreme Court agreed with me.
Speaking of the Supreme Court, you've also been involved in a number of class actions. That's sort of your specialty as well. And
yes.
You've made a lot of money for a lot of people.
Yes, it's one of the things I realized, Marcus, when I discovered class actions. You know, I've always enjoyed representing the underdog and helping people out who are being pushed around by government in particular. And then I discovered with class actions, instead of just helping the one person that's sitting in front of you, you can help thousands of people at the same time. So I was involved in the tainted blood cases back in the 90s. I brought the first successful constitutional class action, a case called Hislop in Canada. And then my citation recognizes one of my more recent and really important cases, the LGBT purge class action, which settled for a record $145 million, the largest financial compensation for LGBT discrimination anywhere in the world. And of course, led to the famous apology by the Prime Minister in the House of Commons.
So do you feel like a legal Robin Hood, taking from the government and giving to those who are in some way marginalized?
It's funny, actually. I'm laughing because my grandfather was a sheriff.
The sheriff of Nottingham.
Not the sheriff of Nottingham. He was a nice sheriff. Yeah, a little bit. I mean, someone called me once a knight in shining armor, which made me blush. But you realize what a privilege it is to be a lawyer in this society and how important lawyers are in defending human rights and taking on the big guys. And so it is often like Robin Hood or David and Goliath, all of those cultural memes that we're familiar with of little guys standing up to big guys. And that's certainly been the story of my career. And I think it's pretty good for a kid from Elliott Lake,
Why do you think you've been so successful doing that?
Well, I suppose I really was raised by parents who had a strong belief in caring for other people and being good citizens and standing up for what was right and not being afraid of negative consequences if you were doing the right thing. My father was a police officer. My parents were both very active volunteers in Elliott Lake and community organizations and local politics and so on. And I grew up in an era in the 60s and 70s where we were really aware of, there were all these social movements, that Black people were standing up for their rights, women were standing up for their rights, and gay people were standing up for their rights. And, I happened to have the good fortune to be a reasonably capable lawyer who came along at the right time when the Charter of Rights came in the same time as I graduated from law school. And I seized the tools that were put in front of me to challenge government. And I've done so. And, despite the fact that I've sued the king and his mother many, many times, he was kind enough to give me the Order of Canada.
There you go. And you've represented people in Elliott Lake as well, of course, and during the mall collapse to the citizens who were affected. Why go back? You could have worked anywhere. You could have stayed in Toronto.
Yep. Yes, I could have. Well, my husband comes from a small town, and when he retired, we started thinking about leaving Toronto and going to a smaller town, slower pace of life. And the mall collapse happened, and it really was like a gut punch to me. It really profoundly affected me. It's very traumatic to see a terrible thing happen and not have any control of it. But I realized how I could help was doing the mall collapse inquiry and helping the victims. And I went back to Elliott Lake for that. And I realized, I really love the North. And if we're looking at a small town to retire to, what's wrong with Elliott Lake? Lots of other people retired to Elliott Lake.
That's true.
Why should? And so Marcus, I call myself a homing pigeon because there's a few of us. I always say you can take the boy out of the North, but you can't take the North out of the boy. There's something about the North that stays with you and calls to you when you're back. And I had the experience of living back in Elliott Lake. And all the things I loved about Elliott Lake were still there. And the thing that I liked least about Elliott Lake growing up, which was the pervasive homophobia that was common not just in Elliott Lake, but in many communities. And that was a thing of the past. I helped start Elliott Lake Pride. And it's been very popular with not just the LGBT community in Elliott Lake, but with the broader community. Everybody likes to have fun, and they enjoy celebrating our acceptance. And that's really in the best tradition of our Northern culture.
Are you going to celebrate your Order of Canada in some way?
Absolutely. You know, it comes sort of in two stages. They announce it, and you get this little lapel pin, or at least I'm supposed to get it. The mail strike didn't help me very much there. So I think once I get the lapel pin, we'll have a party at the Masonic Lodge in Elliott Lake. And then there'll be a second celebration when I actually get the medal. The medal gets presented at Rideau Hall sometime in the next year. So first party will be about the fact that I'm a member of the Order of Canada. And the second party, people will actually get to touch the medal. It's kind of like the Stanley Cup, you know, people like to actually see it and touch it. So that will happen later.
And you're going to be a celebrity. You're already a celebrity in Elliott Lake.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was, I had that funny experience when I was growing up that I was on Reach for the Top. I don't know if you remember that, Marcus.
I do.
Back in this, I was on Reach for the Top, and we had the first Reach for the Top team, and we won the Sudbury Championships. We defeated St. Charles College, and I thought that was going to be the pinnacle of my life. I've accomplished a few other things since then.
Well, you certainly have. High school quiz show to Order of Canada. It's been wonderful talking to you. Thanks so much.
And it's always great talking to you, Marcus, and I enjoy listening to Morning North regularly in Elliott Lake, and it's always a wonderful occasion when we have happy news about Elliott Lake on Morning North.